Yeah, like you go from watching him be this rigid block of a human to this like wiggly little pasta noodle. Like he goes from uncooked pasta to cooked
To
pasta
cooked
in one
pasta.
scene.
You told me you hadn't downloaded done the Quinn stuff yet, right?
I have not yet.
I guess I could have known that because you look well rested. So clearly you are not suffering from what I'm suffering from. I had the thought last night. It was a 45-minute long episode. And at the 45-minute mark, I was like, I wonder if 100,000 people jerk off all at the same time. Like, is there a big, fun, special, energetic wave that goes around the earth? Probably. Probably.
And this is Venus Kazemi.
Hey, gorgeous people. Happy Friday, January 9th. It is finally here. Today is the day we are going to get into the sordid, the sexy astrology of heated rivalry. I'm going to go ahead and assume that if you're here, it's because you are as virile for this show as me and my guest are, and we're going to get right into it. If you don't know, I am Alexandra Blair. I'm your fearless host here at Nine Lives Astrology. Every day on my channel, we try to take astrology out of the dry, theoretical old textbooks and drag it by its sexy, sweaty jockstrap with our teeth down into the stories and mythologies that we are already living and occupying and breathing so that we can try to understand how astrology works in our real everyday life. And this video is no exception. If you can't tell already, we're really going to be getting into it with this video, so make sure that you have your headphones in and that your boss is on lunch break. A couple quick updates right up front. I recently launched a Patreon page, but instead of doing a boring old Patreon, I actually launched an awesome, vibrant astrology community that you can join. There's all kinds of fun little corners and chat rooms to be talking about things like, say, Ilya Rosanoff's 10th house Leo stellium or Shane Hollander's baby girl Mars Venus in Cancer. This week we're doing an awesome creative ritual, getting together and making something as a group for the new moon in Capricorn. If any of that sounds interesting to you, or if you want to support me and my channel, this is one of the most straightforward ways to do that. Go ahead, join my community, hit that link in the description. Also, my dear friend and fellow astrologer Sarah Posh and I are running a second round of our incredibly rewarding mentorship program. Sarah and I are both classically trained, so we are well versed in those dry, dusty old 1,000-year philosophical principles, but we really do try to make it bite-sized and accessible and also help you get a better understanding of how your specific natal planets work. It is a 10-week mentorship program and it starts this month. Definitely check that out in the description too. Last thing, we will be using Astrotheoros to cast natal charts for these characters. As you know, I'm running a promo with Astrotheoros, so if you want an astrology software that is affordable, responsive, and was made in this millennia, definitely check out Astrotheoros and let's support the brands that support the things that we love. My code is 9lives. You can get a month free. Check it out and see if you like it. I recommend the software to all of my clients and friends. If you just want to look at your chart, if you want to look at transits, if you want to look at solar return stuff, maybe you want to get fancy and look at declinations and zodiacal releasing, Astrotheoros is your man. All right, no more stalling. My friend Zacchaeus and I have been preparing, researching, re-researching, re-watching, rereading, sending each other thousands and thousands of words and memes and voice notes for the past several weeks. And we recorded quite a little conversation for you that has only been very lightly edited because nothing has been pissing me off more than these heated rivalry people saying, sorry, we're going over time. Well, Zacchaeus and I, we aren't sorry. Here is our full 2-hour conversation. There was so much that we talked about, and then when I was watching back in the editing, there was so much that I wanted to add. So let me know everything that you love or that we missed or that you hate in the comments. All right, let's go. I am so excited to be filming this, and I can't think of a more perfect guest to be having on to the show. Please welcome my dear friend, cosmic sis and bestie, Zacchaeus. Hello, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Feeling spicy and ready to chat heated rivalry, baby.
Would you believe I'm always ready to talk about heated rivalry?
Yeah, because we do.
Yeah.
All day, every day.
Because we do all day, every day. We just invented this show as an excuse to do an eagle-eyed rewatch of the show and every interview the actors have ever given and every interview Jacob Tierney has ever given and Rachel Reed. We just made this all up for ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why don't you tell the people a little bit about your bad self?
Yes, I'm so excited to be here and talking about this incredible show that I can't get out of my head. I am a professional stage actor, dialect and accent coach. I also run a private voice studio. I teach singing lessons, as well as a studio at a nearby university where I teach. I do a lot. And I'm also an astrologer and fully obsessed with heated rivalry.
And a Reiki practitioner.
And I'm a Reiki master teacher, yeah. So
do you guys hear this Gemini stellium in full effect over here or what?
Know thyself.
Let's talk a little bit about how this kind of came to be and what the hell's going on here, because I do really feel like it's become even the joke of everyone being obsessed with Heated Rivalry has become a meme in and of itself. So it's not just the show, it's the response to the show, which we're going to talk about closer to the end of the episode. We're going to get into why now and why this moment. But I think it's been really interesting to see fandom erupt. Fandom is so fucking back. I mean, like, I just don't watch TV. I talk a lot about cultural references on my show, and I bring astrology into books and movies and TV and art and visual art and culture that we've seen time and again. But I actually really don't watch that much TV in my life. Like, I don't own a TV. And it's been really interesting to see how this has kind of lit me up in an awesome way. Like, I think, you know, for reference, I started Buffy like 20 months ago. I started Buffy at a dark time 20 months ago, and I just barely am in season 6. And I love that show. And obviously that show has a prolific fan response and fandom associated with it too. How are you feeling about fandom and how fucking obsessive this show has made the entire world?
So, like, I'm like, my day job is I'm a professional stage actor, dialect and accent coach. So this show is really special and like really scratching a part of my brain in a
Right.
special way. Where I work, like, we're sort of the last true repertory theater in the country, like maybe even the world, in the way that we produce theater. I'm constantly it's a very blessed thing to say, but I'm always doing plays and I'm always doing musicals. And so when I'm performing two different shows, kind of one in the evening, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, I'm also rehearsing two other shows. And so there's not a lot of room in my brain for new narratives. And so I tend to go back to shows that I've already completed to watch, like, as like content that I'm taking in. I'm usually not in the moment of a show, but this one dropped at like the perfect time in my life to where I have spaciousness in my head, and I guess in my heart too, to take in the story. But it's been wild, like, to watch this thing, just like, in my life, yes, but watching it take the literal world by storm, it's been incredible to watch that.
I actually really relate to your comment about not always having space to take in the narratives, because that's kind of how I feel, especially about astrology content. Like, I can't, as a mutable sun, we'll talk about this when we look at Connor's mutable sun. It's like I can't just be listening to other people's stuff, because then it starts coming out of my mouth. I think this kind of ties into your Jupiter and Gemini, which we're going to show Zacchaeus's chart here for those of you who are interested. Um, but like, there's an incoherent quality to Jupiter and Gemini. There's like a way too many ideas all at once quality that's softened in your chart by your other placements and the dignity. But I feel like I'm very often on the edge of something that's moving. I just don't get interested very often, right? Like, things come to me and come across my timeline. This show came into me the week it was released, and I was not familiar with the books. And I had no reason to have this come across my brain space. And yet somehow I was able to watch every episode as it dropped and like had this come in at just the right time. Let's talk a little bit about what the fuck we're doing here, okay? Because we are going to be talking about, this is like a really rare occurrence. We actually have God given, Rachel Reed given birthdays for these two main characters. So they have canonical birthdays, and I'm not really sure how astrologically educated Rachel Reed is, but she has commented on their sun signs as being a part of their character, saying like, obviously Shane's a Taurus, obviously Ilya's a Gemini. We agree, of course. We're going to be looking at those two characters' charts and exploring a lot of the themes of the show and the characters through the lens of their natal charts. We're also going to look where it makes sense at Connor and Hudson's charts, but we're going to do our best to be whatever the opposite of parasocial is, regular social. There's so much that you can tell about somebody astrologically by their chart. It's actually kind of disturbing and unethical to go too deep into it if somebody hasn't really given you their explicit permission, even if they're a public figure. So we're going to talk a little bit about Connor and Hudson's charts, our dear close personal friends, Connor and Hudson. But we're not going to go into speculation. We're just going to stick to things that they've said in the media and things that seem really obvious about the ways that they portray their characters. We're going to do the same for Jacob Tierney and Rachel Reed, who I think to some extent have even less openly agreed to be public people. I think actors to some extent agree to be public figures. And so there's like a level of visibility and scrutiny that maybe isn't always desired by people who work behind the scenes, like showrunners or authors. So we are not going to talk about Hudson's childhood or Connor's relationship to a beautiful kind of melancholy, for example, but we are going to talk about the things that they have talked about in interviews, especially as it relates to playing these characters on the show. Along those lines, we're not going to speculate about real people's rising signs, but Zacchaeus and I feel very fucking comfortable speculating about these characters' rising signs because we see them living their lives in their own context. We hear their inner monologue in these books. And also, it's very obvious what their rising signs are. So we are going to talk through that. A note on using untimed charts is that it's always my practice to time them at noon, and the moon will move plus or minus 6 degrees in any given day. Now, for most people and characters in the show, that doesn't make a difference. For Shane, it kind of does, and we'll talk about that when we get into Shane.
And spoiler alert, woo, woo, woo. So silly. We will be covering all 6 episodes from the season 1 of Heated Rivalry, including some content and information that comes from the book. So just be aware, there are spoilers. And if you haven't watched the series, pause this video right now. Go watch it.
What are you even doing?
What are you doing?
Get out of here.
Go watch it, get obsessed, and then come back and stay obsessed with us.
We are going to do our best not to talk about or spoil anything from book 2 of Shane and Ilya's story, which is called The Long Game. I've read that. Zacchaeus hasn't. So, normally I feel pretty comfortable with spoilers on my show because I don't have to look people in the eye when I deliver them. But I'm not going to look into Zacchaeus's eye and ruin The Long Game. I do have a couple notes, brief allusions or non-spoilery things that I'm going to mention about The Long Game as we talk about the characters. But for the most part, there will be no hard spoilers whatsoever about that second book. All right. Are we ready?
We're ready, baby.
Let's fucking do it. Let's start with, what can I even say? What kind of bullshit can I even say to cover up the fact that Ilya Rozanov is like catnip for a girl like me, my darling, the object of all my affections. And I don't even want him, by the way. I want him to be with Shane. Ilya Rozanov. This is Ilya Rozanov's natal chart. Zacchaeus and I both feel so strongly about Ilya being a Scorpio rising. He has a Gemini sun. He has a Leo moon, but not just a Leo moon. He has this incredible 10th house Leo stellium that we're going to dig into all of this opposite this mean, nasty, evil father, 4th house Saturn. Let's get into it. I want to start by just addressing this Scorpio rising. So I'm admittedly not great at the rising sign guessing game. Like, this is something people love to do to you when they find out you're an astrologer, is that they're like, so what's my rising sign? Or like, guess what sign I am? I fucking hate that game and I don't enjoy playing it. But I will say I can smell a fucking Scorpio from a mile away. And I think it's because I have my Pluto conjunct my MC in Scorpio, but I can smell a Scorpio. I swear to you, I'll be watching a show or reading a book and I'm like, that's a Scorpio. It's the eyes, it's the demeanor. I was feeling this when Francois Arnault, who plays Scott Hunter, was giving his acceptance speech at the MHL Awards of the MVP, and just his little eye movements. I was like, this motherfucker has some powerful Scorpio shit. And I look in his chart, of course, he's got Saturn in Scorpio. He's got the Sun and Mars conjunct in Cancer, which has like a scorpionic feel to it. I can smell a Scorpio. So that's part of why I really feel like he's a Scorpio rising, is that Ilya Rozanov definitely has some of that Scorpio energy. What do you think about the Scorpio rising?
So mysterious and so, I don't know. What are the kids saying these days? It's like, they just pull you. They pull you so easily with their, I know one of the tropes about Scorpio rising is that they're very secretive. And I think too that I see that in Ilya too, in the fact that he says things like, I go home to Russia tomorrow, and right. He is wanting Shane to pull the information out of that and hear him and understand him without him needing to explicitly say it. So right. I think that's another characteristic that I love that really points to Ilya being a Scorpio rising. But there's just that haunting, hidden, mysterious, it's just so Ilya.
Oh, it's so Ilya. I mean, I'm thinking of a quote from one of the books where Shane calls Ilya hot. And Ilya immediately is like, Shane Hollander, you've never called me hot before. And Shane's like, yes, I have. And he goes, no, you haven't. I would remember. He's like, no, I would know if you had and you haven't. And there's some of like that Leo energy in there. But I'm always struck when I talk about Scorpios by the fact that actually, physiologically, scorpions can't survive in water. They're not water dwelling animals. They can survive in water by holding their breath. And some species of scorpions can hold their breath long enough to survive for quite a while submerged in water, but they don't breathe in water. They don't function in water. So I think that's another part of what's going on here. Like when we think about Ilya Rozanov, he feels deeply. It's not totally in a watery way. It's kind of more, I think a lot of his feeling engine comes from the Saturn opposition to his Leo stellium, but there is certainly this scorpionic edge to him. I also think, and this is a gentle spoiler for the long game, such a common interaction that I have with a certain type of client is that they will sit through a session with me and they'll just be going like this, and I'll be going, yeah, do you have any follow-up questions? Do you have a reaction to that? And they're just like, no, I mean, sounds good. And then 3 days later, I get this email that's like, you absolutely changed my life with that reading. Like that was the deepest anyone's ever spoken to me. And it's this crazy thing. 100% of the time, that's from a Scorpio, a person with Scorpio placements. 100% of the time when I have this interaction. And Ilya has a very, very similar interaction with a mental health professional in the long game, where he's kind of just walled up, bottled up. And then probably, I'm thinking like if I'm that mental health professional, I'm like, I don't know, did we get anywhere? I don't know. That's how I feel after I read for a Scorpio. I'm like, hopefully I said anything of value, and I really have to have faith in my own ability. And then 3 days later, you're getting the call back of like, that was actually one of the most transformative and incredible experiences of my life. I do also want to touch on the fact that Ilya has Pluto in the first house if he's a Scorpio rising. And I had a cool Scorpio rising client with Pluto in the first house once described this placement as feeling like an agent of change. And I think that that's actually like a really apt descriptor of Ilya as well.
Along those lines of Ilya being an agent of change, I love that phrase, because something about the way that he like draws Shane's attention in, there's something about him creating change within him as well. So I think that really tracks. We really crushed this.
The Scorpio rising is just completely obvious. I mean, we had a little debate. We had a back and forth about Shane. Ilya is a Scorpio rising. And obviously, to whatever extent that we can trust that Connor Story embodies Ilya Rozanov, which I think most of us have have a lot of trust in that. But even Connor Story has spoken in ways that make me feel that Ilya is more of a Scorpio rising, just talking about him being bottled up, talking about the ways that he processes emotions and the things that he chooses to keep inside. I think we feel pretty good about this Scorpio rising. And as a result, what we get from this Scorpio rising is this gorgeous Leo stellium in the 10th house. Now, I will confess about Ilya's chart. Ilya Rozanov canonically was born 3 days after me, a mere 72 hours after me. So I'm very fucking familiar with this astrology and the ways that it plays out in life. And I guess you can hear why I would die for Ilya Rozanov.
Mm-hmm.
I would kill for Hudson Williams. And then I'm like, I would take a vow of knighthood to protect Shane and Connor from the evils of the world. You can hear why I would die for Ilya Rozanov, right? Because I would die for me. What a Leo stellium thing for me to say. But this Leo stellium, let's talk a little bit about this, because I think this is one of the core pieces of symbolism from the entire show. And these characters' relationships is the dynamic between the solar and the lunar. This is so powerfully echoed in their astrology, which is why I'm kind of like, Rachel Reed, let's talk about how and why you picked these birthdays. Because it was either an incredible synchronicity from the gods, or Rachel Reed has taken an astrology class or two. But this solar stellium, it is bold, it's brash, it's visible, it's really heart-driven and authentic. And so there's a lot of places we can go with this. I think of Ilya always taking his press interviews shirtless, and his big gold cross representing his mom with that Leo moon up there. Him saying, for example, that he's going to score 50 goals in his rookie season. And in the book, Shane reflects on that, and he thinks privately that he has the same goal, but he sort of is curious about the fact that Ilya would be bold enough to say this out loud. I also think of like the scene where he's like, I'm on the cover of the fucking game, which I love so much. There's so many beautiful ways that I feel like this 10th house Leo stellium that's so heart driven and so solar comes out in the show.
Yeah, like I'm looking at this Leo stellium and I'm seeing this Jupiter Mars conjunction here, and I'm
Hmm.
just struck. That to me just screams famous athlete. Like in the sign of Leo, it screams famous athlete to me. There's something about this martial placement in Leo, this passionate, driven sign that is being blown up larger than life by Jupiter. And the other thing in regards to his mother is this moon in the 10th house here, co-present and super close to
Right.
all of these placements. Like I think it's in the book here that like the his mother's death is actually what catapults him into his professional hockey
Right.
career. And so it's so fascinating to see this moon in the 10th house.
I mean, God, I look at that moon Venus and what I hear is she would have loved you like I love you. With the sunlight on his face, even, right? These 10th house placements, I mean, it obviously indicates someone of extreme eminence. We look at this chart and we see eminence. It's pretty interesting, the moon, to your point, because she has a wider range of engagement. She is conjunct all of these planets, no matter where you time this chart. Like she's in there in the mix. And obviously, that Mars is his chart ruler, which I think is pretty interesting because Mars is his out of sect malefic, just meaning Mars is a more challenging planet for him, but it's pretty well dignified. Like this Mars, we can hear the ways that it hurts him in the book and in the show, but it also really helps him. There's also something to be said about people with stelliums and how much of their life is snarled up into the complicated knot of a stellium. So if you don't have a stellium or if you live a life that isn't like this, it's often hard to see. How can all of these parts of my life represented by all of these different planets be tied in together? But it's so clear for Ilya because for Ilya, his 10th house work is also his play. It's also his family stuff. It's also his sex life. It's also his ancestral homeland stuff. It's also his long term relationships. It's also his friends. It's also his mental health. Every part of his life is snarled up into this Leo stellium. And I think it's really interesting to consider the fourth, 10th house dynamic here because this Leo stellium is opposed by such a strong, an oppressively strong Saturn in Aquarius. I think some part of this fourth, 10th house dynamic is going to require me to just set us up here because when we think about the 10th house, historically in astrology, this is the place of eminence. This is the highest point in the sky in the moment you were born. So there's a sense this 10th house in astrology tells us the story of where you will go in this life, how big you will be, how bright your stars will burn. Obviously, Ilya Rozanov is on the cover of the fucking game. Like, that's how bright he's burning. And that's what a global superstar he is in countries he doesn't even live in from age 15 on, right? So that is oppositional by nature. The 10th house opposes the fourth. And the fourth house is the so called subterranean place. If the 10th house is heaven, the fourth house is the basement. And every time you think you're at the basement floor, there's another floor deeper down. It is like the private things you do inside your house when nobody's watching. It's the roots of the tree of you. It is the deepest possible subterranean place of our psyche and our existence. So for Ilya to have this really prominent dichotomy, I think it's represented so well in the books and in the show, which have a lot to say about that fourth, 10th house dynamic between both of the boys.
Feel like I love the analogy of the roots of the tree. There's also something here that this Saturn placement opposing all of these placements, it feels like an anchor. There's an anchoring, yes, and that like can be positive, but in this case, this anchoring is something that I feel tethers him in a way that is really challenging. This oppositional sort of relationship here. It's a constant reminder of the darkness of home, thinking about the ways his sort of journey as a person, as a character, is to cut those ties to his childhood home and his upbringing, so that this Saturn can then become a positive influence in his life where it's actually teaching him what home should be.
The cottage.
Yeah, exactly.
No, it's so
Exactly.
good. I pulled a couple quotes from the book because this is so clearly illustrated in the book. He says things like he wanted the weight of his family and the weight of his country lifted because he wanted to be himself. Fuck, that is so powerful. And historically, we see time and again the tonic for a heavy Saturn remediation, astrological remediation for a heavy Saturn influence, for the weighted blanket, for the oppressive expectation is sunlight. It's so brilliant that Jacob Tierney teases this out throughout the entire show. Really, the first time we ever see sunlight. Probably, arguably, the first time Shane and Ilya have ever really seen each other in the light of day is when they're having this really interesting fourth, 10th house meeting. And it's the tuna melts. And it is a 10th house encounter that wants to be a fourth house encounter. So we see moments where like Ilya is trying to get Shane to stay and to experience him in his home, in his fourth house, and to have these moments of privacy, but they're not able to fully open up to each other yet. Like Ilya goes to take his phone call and he actually has to gas himself up before he returns to the couch. He's like shaking his hands out because he's getting the real fourth house, the floor beneath the floor he thinks he's in with Shane. His ancestral homeland is calling and saying, hey, don't forget, you're never going to be able to go home if you're queer. And we even see that in the ways that Ilya tries to bring up their relationship, which this is taking us somewhere interesting that I think we need to touch on, which is Ilya's sun, Mercury in Gemini. So I think that when people see a Mercury in Gemini, they assume that someone's a good communicator. And that is very well true. I again have my sun Mercury in Gemini, just like Ilya Rozanov. The thing is that a Mercury in Gemini, just because it is dignified, doesn't make it a straightforward expression of communication. In fact, I would argue that Shane has a more straightforward Mercury placement. Ilya's Mercury placement, that Mercury in Gemini is like a little trickster. It's weird. It's playing mind games. It's trying to bait Shane into saying he likes him by instigating him with this conversation of, do you like girls? He could just be like, hey, are you gay? Are we something? Do you like me? But instead, it's like playing all of these mind games with himself. And that Sun Mercury buried in the eighth house, I think also really speaks to the fact that Ilya struggles with translation all of the time as well. He has this double layer of not only is he a 20-something-year-old man in an extremely oppressive professional environment, he is translating everything he hears from a notoriously difficult language to another notoriously difficult language.
Yeah, our sun represents our like our purpose, where we shine, or what drives us, I suppose. And that being in the eighth house, there's something here about having to learn how to break away and individuate from karmic entanglement. And that is absolutely a thing that we see Ilya going through. I mean, even beyond like that opposition from Saturn up to the 10th house, that stellium, like we see this sun, just like this bright spot in his chart, this like loud place in his chart. That's a constant reminder of the karmic entanglements where he has grown up and in this family.
Really put yourself in the position of these characters in the world that they live in a real life situation where, if, for example, Ilya and Shane were to come out and be together, think about how many lives in the world throughout the history of like the time they're living in and then the next 2 or 3 decades that would really impact. I'm struck by the fact that like the casting directors were interviewed and they said that they actually did a worldwide casting call and they were actually really trying to get a Russian actor to play Ilya. And they had zero submissions from Russia. That's the oppressive environment. And it's 2025. And the story that is being written begins in 2008. It's a really, really revolutionary thing that is happening with these characters. I don't think we can overstate that. And I think Shane's chart also has some really interesting eighth house placements. Zacchaeus, to your point, the eighth house is commonly associated with like investments and other people's money. Yeah, it's all those things. But on an energetic level, it's other people's energetic resources. And if you have challenging placements there, it can feel like you are just an energetic blood bank and other people are constantly siphoning from you, which of course we know Ilya feels. Bullshit, Ilya, bullshit, more. He like never wants to go home again. Like it's really fucked up little situation if it's in a bad spot. But if it's in a good spot, we have things like Ilya showing up in all of the other books, basically playing like a queer fairy godmother in everybody else's love story, like playing little matchmaker and making the Barbies kiss in all the other books.
I was going to say, to your point, just to add to that, like one of the ways that sometimes I see the second eighth house axis sort of playing out is the second house, you can think about money coming in or energy coming in, and then the eighth house is constantly going out. Like it's constantly leaving. So that image of the blood bank, and of course, like Ilya, one of his lines that he says in his in the incredible like 5-minute Russian monologue that he has, is that he talks about them being like vampire. I think he's talking about money, but it's also his energy. It's his spirit. I mean, like, it is his spirit, like his vitality. And again, that sun placement, which is a symbol of our vitality.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that second eighth house axis that you're talking about also can work backwards. The eighth house can be money in and energy in and receiving. It's like a very powerful place of receiving. And the second house can be a leak, especially around self-worth. The second house can be a really, really challenging just drain in the bottom of our container of self-worth and our values and our principles. So thinking about the fact that Ilya in his early life would have been going through Pluto in Sagittarius opposing those two placements, and thinking about what we know about the childhood he had where his father was so hard on him. He obviously, during that Pluto opposition, the situation with his mother and her taking her own life. It's really crazy how good Rachel Reed was with these natal charts. Like, I'm impressed. I think about this a lot because I have my opposition is across houses 2 and 8. So I have an 8th house Leo stellium and my 2nd house Saturn. And for me, like, that Saturn is my chart ruler. It's my out of sect malefic. It's the most challenging planet in my chart. Like, I am discovering self-worth now, which is an important thing we can say about Saturn, is that in the Vedic tradition, it's said to mature at age 35. So I think we can see that in the boys' stories too, without foreshadowing too much of the long game. That solar light, that daylight really comes into their lives a little bit later in life for both of them. We're going to talk more about Ilya's chart, but we're going to bring Shane into the mix too. If you have parts of Ilya's chart that are your favorite, put them in the comments so that I can read them and pretend that they're about my chart too. Like a good little Leo stellium. I got lucky. I got a Cancer moon. But let's talk about baby Shane's chart. Good God, I love this chart. This chart is so fun. As I mentioned before, with an untimed chart, the moon can move plus or minus 6 degrees from the chart at noon. So in some world, Shane maybe has a Pisces moon. However, we're going to make a very strong case for Shane having an Aries moon, and we'll let that unfold. But Zacchaeus and I feel pretty good about Shane as a Virgo rising, and I'll say a couple things about that too. I don't think much else in his chart really explains his like neat freak nature and also his neurodivergence better than having Mercury as a chart ruler and having Virgo as your rising sign. I also think there's like a really compelling case to be made for the fact that Mercury as a chart ruler for Shane also rules his 10th house. And we know from the books and from the show even, hockey is Shane's entire life. And that hockey is so tied in to his relationship with his mother, which I think makes sense for that Mercury being in Aries, especially if the moon is also in Aries. And I mean, just take a minute to think about Una Hollander. So often our relationship with our mother is represented by the moon in our natal charts. So the fact that Shane's moon is in Aries and we have Una Hollander, even when he's coming out, there's a moment where they're crying, they're having this beautiful moment, and she's like, okay, so what's the plan? Enough. Like, let's get going. Such a cardinal Aries moon mom thing to say. And she comes back in and she's planning out their brand deals, right?
The aggressive, like, stage mom energy. Which is one that I'm very familiar with. Not that my mother was a stage mom, but I see it like in the young people that work at our theater. This Aries moon really plays out in Una Hollander as this stage mom. I don't know what the equivalent of the hockey mom. I guess that's
the hockey mom. Hockey mom.
I think too, that being co-present with Mercury there and her being so part of the structure of Shane's life. I think there's something about the moon and Mercury sort of blending their energies in this placement that speaks directly to how Shane is also showing up in the world, because the moon can also represent the set or the scene in which our life takes place. So we see that it's very out there, it's very aggressive and initiatory, but there's also that sense of the immense organization, the detailed need for every single thing to be just so.
When I was thinking about what kind of a moon sign Shane Hollander would have, like, I do understand the temptation to go into Pisces, but I think a lot of Shane's baby girl can be explained in his Cancer parts. I just think like Aries moons have such a way of speaking. Every single one I know, they almost have these crazy things that they say that just explode out of them. And I hear so much of that when I was going back and looking through the book and the show for evidence of what Shane's moon sign could be. The fact that he is constantly saying, you're an asshole. He says it at least once an episode. And he's like, fuck you. And he's just constantly sort of exploding out these little expletives and ways that he talks about people is so Aries moon. Now, I think most of the Aries moons I know are a little more inventive than just saying you're an asshole. But I will say I went back into the book, and at the point where he and Ilya are in the showers together, kind of their first explicitly sexual encounter, Shane stays later in the shower, not Ilya. And Shane is actually standing in the shower, wondering if he could smash through the tile wall to get out of the bathroom without encountering Ilya. I'm like, that is such an Aries moon thing to say. Can I smash through this tile wall like the Kool-Aid man and explode out of here? And even when he's upset at the night of the draft, he goes downstairs to work out because he's upset. I think there's a lot of evidence for Shane having an Aries moon. And that kind of rules out some of the other risings, by the way, that we debated potentially Shane having. I think I feel really good about this. Virgo rising, Aries moon.
Oh, yeah. This feels right. It's like in the same way that when we sort of landed, which we did basically at the same time, landed on Ilya being a Scorpio rising, it's like we got to Virgo rising for this, and I was like, oh, everything clicks and makes sense.
I think it's also powerful that their moon signs trine each other. There is so little true conflict between these men. The conflict, the villain of the story is homophobia, and the secondary villain of the story is miscommunication. There is not a huge conflict between them. They are not asking each other to change. They are rarely kind of provoking each other. And you can see that in their synastry. Even their Mars signs are in aversion to one another. They're not really fighting. And even times where you would expect a big fight, like when Shane freaks out and leaves, or maybe when Ilya is kind of having this hard time after the NHL awards and he's on the rooftop in Vegas, they just don't have bad blood for long. Their Mars signs don't provoke each other in that way. I find it really interesting that Ilya's Mars is in a square to Shane's Sun. That I feel really pulls us into their like soft dom sub dynamic. Ilya in the book actually wonders to himself why he gets so much pleasure out of watching Shane be uncomfortable. He doesn't know why he gets so much pleasure out of it, but it brings him so much enjoyment. So I think like some of the sharpest ways that they conflict with each other in their natal synastry are the parts that they love most about each other. And that's so special.
I think that's such an awesome point. I don't know. They're like instantly comfortable with each. I don't know that I would say that Shane was instantly comfortable with Ilya, but like they're instantly in each other's energy. It's like they
Deep.
are.
Yeah.
They are deep. Yeah. It's like there's something really beautiful about seeing two people be attracted to and then eventually in love with the other person for who they are. Warts and all, they say. But I think there's something really lovely about someone not trying to change someone, which I think is so frequent in our today dating world.
I agree. I think this is where we get into Shane's lunar symbolism. So Shane obviously has Mars in Cancer conjunct the South Node in Chiron, and then he has Venus in Cancer as well. And thank God that Venus is early in Cancer, far enough away from that mayhem that's going on. But let's dive into this because I think what we're talking about here, when they even first meet, it's maybe not exactly love at first sight, but there is real compatibility and interest at first sight in a way that just feels like the sun and the moon meeting each other, kind of like the yin yang symbol. They just interlock together and they feel this in each other. Zacchaeus and I are going to get into queer ambiguity and some of the reasons and ways that that plays out in a minute here. But this is a really powerful solar-lunar connection that they have that we know that Jacob Tierney, even director of photography Jackson Perrell, Even music supervisor Scotty Taylor, like everybody who worked on the show works in this solar lunar situation. I think even some of the clothes that they wear and the colors that they wear and even the set design at certain pivotal moments pull in this solar lunar symbolism. Let's just start here with the Cancer placements because I just think of the fact one of my favorite memes about the show. I mean, there's two versions of it, and it's one's Venus and one's Mars, but it's like Shane as the absolute princess of the baby girls. Like the moment where they are having the conversation at the dinner table, and Shane's having a literal panic attack, and then Ilya says the word boyfriend, and we don't see Shane's face, but his face is like absolute peak baby girl. And then he even like leans out for a little pouty, bratty little kiss at the end of that. The other side of that, the Mars and Cancer side of that, is his fucking face when Ilya says, I could marry Svetlana. The laser beam face. And it's like this meme right here where it says, I fear Ilya Rozanov is never winning an argument in that relationship. Like that is the power of what Shane's got going on in Cancer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Ilya is not going to win a single fight in that household with those eyes. Those
No.
eyes, and I know that that's Hudson bringing that to the table with his incredible depth of thought and feeling as an actor. Yeah, I mean that Venus placement there in Cancer. I'm a Cancer rising, and I also have Mars in Cancer in my first house. Like Cancers are deep feelers. We feel things so deeply, and then you add in this Mars placement, this fiery sort of aggressive Mars placement, and it's almost like boiling water. It's this constant like boiling where it's like, I want to communicate what I'm feeling, but sometimes it just results in me like wanting to cry instead of yell.
I think a huge part of the solar and lunar symbolism that is brought into the show in a lot of the artistic choices, also in the astrology of these two characters, comes back to some of the philosophical underpinnings of the sun and the moon. The sun is kind of the archetypal masculine. It emanates, it radiates, it expresses. And historically, astrologically, the sun has been associated with fate and sort of God and these big systems of creation. The sun is really authentic and it is unshakably itself. It just exists. Alternatively, the moon is sort of the receiver and the reflector. The moon is more of the archetypal feminine. It receives, it reflects, it has more of like an impression system that it deals with, and it governs things that happen here on Earth, like our bodies and the changing tides. And so it really has this changeable nature to it. And I think we see this in both of the men in different ways. Like most people have some of each dynamic in them, but I think archetypally we see Ilya as a more solar figure and we see Shane as a more lunar figure. We kind of even see this dynamic from episode 1. So there's a shot where we see Shane's face right after the draft, and the owner of the Montreal Metros is talking to Una and David Hollander, and Shane is kind of dissociating, not speaking, and they all look at him like they're expecting him to speak. And we see literally the exact opposite of that dynamic when we go up to the second floor and Ilya is speaking and his dad sort of quiets him for speaking. So it's like Shane is taking in and receiving what's happening around him, whereas Ilya is a little more expressive, but both of them are being punished in their own ways for it. Most of their relationship does not touch sunlight. I think it's symbolically important in terms of their journey towards authenticity that we see them experience a couple sunrise moments and sunset moments together. So they have sunset on the beach in episode 5, but by episode 6, they're watching a sunrise together. And this kind of touches on something that I think is a reason why the show is resonating with so many people, is that even in that scene, they are accepting each other so wholly. Like Ilya is outside, shirtless, smoking, sitting on a rock, which is so fucking Ilya. And then Shane comes out with a cup of coffee for him and a blanket for him, like his good little baby girl, Cancer side. But he doesn't even chide Ilya for smoking or get him to put out a cigarette. Like he really is accepting him for who he is, which I think kind of speaks to that solar authenticity as well.
I think that the music supervisor, Scotty Taylor, did such an incredible job here of tying in these solar, lunar, light, dark elements into the songs throughout the show. In episode 3, we have the song Lumière, which literally means light. We've got My Moon, My Man by Feist in episode 4. In episode 4, which is a total bop if you've not listened to it. It's one of my favorite.
But it makes me
it's
sick.
so good. I know. It's so good. It's just so good. And then like we get to the point like the Russian monologue, right? Where Moonlight Sonata
Hmm.
is by Beethoven is being played underneath that Russian monologue. Oh, what is it? Oh yeah, I'll Believe in Anything. This song that plays when
Hmm.
Scott and Kip kiss on the ice in episode 5. The first lyrics are "Give me your eyes, I need sunshine." And that ties back to the episode. Elena, is that her name? She takes them aside and
Yeah.
she's dancing with Scott and she says, you know, he deserves sunshine and so do you. And I just think it's so
Hmm.
good. Like it's so smart. It's so clever to tie that in this moment where Scott and Kip, are stepping out into the sunlight. It's brilliant. And like as a musician, I love thoughtful music. I love it.
I think almost every song that they've chosen has some explicit reference to light or sunlight. And that is echoed in every part of the show. So, director of photography Jackson Perrell often uses this blue and orange lighting dynamic, even in his still photography that he shot while filming that he's been sharing on his Instagram. There is just this gorgeous tension between the orange and the blue, representing, in my mind, sun and moon dynamics. I think we even see that in the costume design from Hannah Pooley, who is the Canadian costume designer, I believe, that was like associated with the show. The choices for Shane and Ilya for when and where they are wearing certain colors. Like for the entire show, we see Ilya wearing almost exclusively black. And it's kind of only at these certain moments, like the club scene where he's wearing that iconic leopard shirt. Bisexual visibility right there in that shirt, drenched in bisexual Gemini chaotic vibes. Or like the blue diesel tank top that he's wearing when they're playing video games. I hate gay Halloween because what do you mean next year you're going to be Ilya in the blue diesel tank top with the video game with his face on it? This gets into some of that queer ambiguity and dread, but I think it is really potent in the fact that Mars is in Cancer. Now, historically, Mars is in a condition called fall in Cancer. And what that means is that Mars is a planet of sharp things and hard things and raging things and angry things. And the moon's domain of Cancer is a place for soft things and love and cuddles and mothering and nurturing. Those energies are not inherently compatible. But in Shane's chart, he has this interesting condition called mutual reception, which means the moon is in a sign ruled by Mars, Aries, and Mars is in a sign ruled by the moon of Cancer. So they can even see each other in his chart. These are all good things. And when you see that in somebody's chart, what it usually shows is that there is a hurtful pattern that, when disrupted, becomes a secret strength or maybe even a superpower. And I think that is so clear in what happens with Shane's family and his mom. This powerful opposition that's in Ilya's chart is also in Shane's chart. He has Saturn opposing Jupiter from his 6th to his 12th. He has these heavy obligations that he feels around his work and these brand deals and his image that is opposed by this secret, beautiful thing that he's found, this secret sunlight that he's found with Ilya. And I love that sun-drenched Jupiter in the 12th actually rules his 4th house too. It's giving I go to the cottage to get away from everyone, to completely isolate, and it's the best feeling in the entire world. But that's a video essay for another time. The point I'm kind of making here is that Shane is genuinely terrified that his mom and his family will be disappointed in him, or that he will somehow have failed some test if he comes out as gay, even to his family. It's something that Ilya brings up to him. I think you can just tell your parents you are gay. Like, you don't have to tell them it's me. But Shane can't and won't. And then when we see the cottage and we see the way that his family reacts, yes, there is surprise and there are necessary apologies there. But by the end of the episode, Ilya's scarfing down pasta. They're kissing in front of his parents. Even Shane's dad says, check your phones. So we know that Ilya's been added to the family group chat. And in the book, Rachel Reed describes this as maybe the best day of Ilya's life. He understands that this is a tense day for Shane, but he says this was arguably the best day of my life because he knew that even if he hadn't already been, he would probably certainly be accepted by Shane's family. And gentle spoiler for the long game, but I love how this is emblematized in Una Hollander saying that Ilya's her favorite son in the very beginning chapters of the long game. So it's like one of those patterns of friction and difficulty and mismatched context that actually becomes a superpower. And Ilya becomes so well integrated in his family and loved by his family.
Yeah, there's like a sense of disappointment because Shane is queer, but I think one of the even bigger things that he's so scared about is that he's lied to his parents, that he's lied to them.
Mm-hmm.
And he
Mm-hmm.
says
Mm-hmm.
frequently, like over and over again in this series, over and over again in the book, where he's like, my family's great. My family's great. And
Right.
I think that's a really interesting dynamic here, that that Venus, like the planet of love and harmony and beauty, femme folks, is in a square, that like area of friction between the life that I'm living, this like eighth house Aries moon, the life that I'm living, the day to day of it, is in a square with this Venus in Cancer. That's really deep feeling, like the friction between those is really evident in Shane's life.
It's that square from the eighth house of like karmic entanglements and generational chain breaking, which obviously Shane is doing in many different ways in his life, but is squaring that 11th house, which is a place where we find hope, optimism, friends, our tribe, the breath in our lungs. So for that to be hitting that Mars is like his feeling of, I can't breathe. I can't even breathe. I can't even do the things that I want to do. Venus is wanting that for him. Venus is advocating for that. And I think we get that later in the books. No spoilers right now, but we do see that 11th house come a little bit online. And when we're talking about this moon Mars dynamic, I think it's important to call out that actor Hudson Williams actually has the moon and Mars together in Scorpio, which is ruled by Mars. So Hudson himself has a very powerful moon Mars aspect and also has this fixed aspect to his chart with Saturn in Taurus, and he's got an Aquarius sun. So Hudson's chart in and of itself has this fixed dynamic to it that Shane really has. And I was struck by one interview that Hudson gave where he talks about the friction he feels when he plays Shane. Like playing Shane is inherently putting yourself into a frictive place. You can see that in this fixed T-square that Shane Hollander has in his chart, where he has Jupiter and Saturn opposing one another, squaring that Taurus sun. One thing I do want to talk about is Shane's neurodivergence, which is not an explicitly stated part of the book. Shane is canonically undiagnosed, but is somewhere on the spectrum. There are many examples of this in the show, but I also think that this is pretty interesting with that eighth house Mercury placement as the chart ruler.
Yeah, I find that interesting too, that the planet of communication and of like innovative like thought is in this eighth house, where there's a sense of obligation to speak a certain way and perform a certain way. I see that playing out in the ways that Shane sort of like stifles himself, or like he doesn't just overtly say what he's thinking, or it takes him a long time to get to the thought.
It takes him a long time to arrive at his feeling, but once he does, he has no problem saying it, right? He's like, what are you fucking saying about Svetlana? Dot, 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 dot. And then the moment he gets it, he's like, don't marry her. He's able to very clearly say it, or to say, come to my cottage, or whatever it is that he wants. But it takes him a long time to arrive there. Let's think about some other scenes where that 4th, 10th house dynamic comes across, because it's so powerful and they're playing with it through this entire show. The tension, the inbuilt tension between the parts of us that we expose for others, our reputation that others have in their mind of us, the ways that we're willing to be seen and put ourselves out into the world, and like our eminence, the things we're known for. That's like the 10th house themes. The 4th house is really that ancestral piece, the childhood piece, the deep, deep roots of us down below. I feel like one of the clearest places that it comes across is the first scene. Even we have Ilya so in his 10th house until the moment Shane shakes his hand twice in 60 seconds. And that's when we see kind of like a smile and a little bit more candor coming out of Ilya. And he even responds to Shane in a different way. I also think about the different kinds of intimacy that they have. So like in episode 4, when they're at Ilya's house, there's something really interesting happening there, because they're having this sex and this intimacy that's very 4th house, but they're also still masking it kind of with their 10th house, because they haven't been honest with each other. Whereas when we're at the cottage in episode 6 and they're kind of like having that spooning sex after they've acknowledged their feelings with each other, there's a reason why people on the internet cannot get over the way Connor Story's face looks as Ilya in that moment. Like just how love drunk he really is. He's so in the 4th house, so unshuttered and unfiltered by those 10th house expectations and pressures.
Also looking at the 2 dinner scenes, we've got the dinner scene after Ilya's father has passed away, and it's so dark and it's so internal and quiet and that's so like
Oh my God.
private and
God, it's
dark
brutal.
and speaks to Ilya's fourth house Saturn. Like you just see it. You can see it in that shot. But then we fast forward to episode 6 where he's like housing a bowl of pasta at the table with Shane's family. It's so gloriously bright and open and present. And it's like there's such intimacy there because they're housed in this gorgeous safe space. And that moment when they first come in and he's this rigid, like, hi, you know, like it's this rigid being trying to be his best behaved Russian son. But then by the time you get to him eating pasta and they've gone through all of it and he's like doing a happy little squirmy dance, like you watch
talking with food in
Ilya
his mouth, like so
talking
loose.
with food in his mouth. Yeah, like you go from watching him be this rigid block of a human to this like wiggly little pasta noodle. Like he goes from uncooked pasta to cooked pasta,
To cooked pasta.
in one scene.
That's so good. That's so good. I also really struck in the book in that just before that scene, Shane is on this whole mental monologue about how he's obsessed with the idea of Ilya meeting his family for any reason. He's like, I don't even care why it happens. It could happen at some random awards dinner, but he feels like he doesn't even have proof that they exist in the same reality. He just wants proof that the man that he loves and his parents that he loves so much exist in the same plane, which speaks a little bit to that 4th-10th tension as well. I also think there's an interesting play on this in the hospital scene because that's a time where we see Shane's defenses lowered chemically. He's on some really good painkillers. And so there's a moment where he actually just forgets to be his 10th house self.
Better.
I mean, he is literally kind of being a cute ass to Ilya and being super sweet. And then the nurse comes in and just for a little moment, he goes, oh no, it's just the funniest little soundbite right there. And when he goes to say goodbye to Ilya, he's like, bye-bye. And then Ilya looks at him and he goes, see you next season. Like, it's such a funny little interplay where his 10th house is actually impaired.
Yeah, and a gorgeous moment for Ilya in that is when he's in this public place and then he gently caresses Shane's face. I think it's so interesting that Ilya, with as aggressive and as hard as he is on the ice, every time he touches Shane, it is gentle and beautiful and gorgeous. Even down to the consent of the first time they have sex. It's like, he's like, is this okay? So yeah, I think that little gorgeous moment of him just gently caressing Shane's face is so beautiful and so like 4th house living in a 10th house moment. Like so.
Yes. This is not totally getting into spoilers, but this is the content of the second book, The Long Game. They're still navigating their relationship. You can imagine the circumstances haven't changed from the end of the first book to the beginning of the second one. But we really get the sense that like Ilya probably wouldn't care as much about coming out as Shane does. Like this process of coming out hits Shane a lot harder than it hits Ilya. I think that's really speaks to the strength of that 10th house sunlight stellium that Ilya really has. He would be his authentic self. And some part of why he doesn't is specifically for Shane and specifically for his partner. With that Leo moon, I feel like Leo moons are so often just so reflective. They don't always do an honest job of checking in with their own needs. What do you think, Zacchaeus? I feel like a Leo moon is just as likely to take care of someone else before they're going to elevate their own needs.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Doubly that coming from my Cancer rising to my Leo moon. It's definitely, I've had to learn a lot about selfishness. It's not even selfishness, but like about self-care. Like that's a big part of my journey is self-care. I think that Ilya is absolutely ready to be himself. He's ready. He's ready to have those queer experiences out loud, especially once the tie to his father and to Russia is broken. I like to imagine that like oppositional cord like tension is just like snapped. And he's finally just like flying in his 10th house. I think there's something, and at this point I can't really think of how old they would be in this moment. Do you have an idea of that?
When? Cottage?
Yeah, like after Ilya's father's death.
Tuna melts happen in November 2016, which I was like watching that just being like, let's just give him a pass for whatever happened in November 2016 because it was a tough time to be alive. So I think his dad must have passed away in 2017. So they would have been 36, both of them.
Wow. Okay, so look at that Saturn perfecting then, or that Saturn
Exactly.
like
Maturing.
morphing or maturing. Yeah, that Saturn maturing there at that age, I think is that's that hard. Wow, that's so astrology good. That's blowing my mind right now.
I know. I know. This really, their story is so astrology good. And Saturn in Aquarius wants you to be okay with being eclectic. It wants you to be okay with being an outsider. So I think that there's something really powerful there in what you're saying. And you also mentioned Zacchaeus, like Ilya always being gentle with Shane. And that is something that I cannot remember whether this was in one of Rachel Reed's deleted scenes or The Long Game, but it is not a major spoiler. But at some point in the canon, Ilya does reflect on the fact that Shane always trusted him to be gentle with him. Even when they had bitter losses against each other, even when they were mad at each other or they weren't completely honest with their feelings with one another, he always knew that Ilya was going to take care of him and be kind to him physically. That also comes through somewhere in Heated Rivalry. I think it's the Skype call in Russia in the book where Ilya is kind of asking Shane about other sexual encounters that he's had. And Shane says that he found kind of a big, strong top somewhere in his life. And Ilya's first question is, did he hurt you? I mean, like, that's his first question, is not this jealous response he even gives to Rose Landry. He like wants to make sure Shane is okay. So cute. I love these boys.
I do too. Oh my god. Oh my god.
Okay. One last thing about that fourth house, like the opposition to Saturn in Ilya's chart, is like sometimes in opposition, we talked about yearning and us, what we're yearning for. Like when they do have that phone call and Shane answers the phone and he's in glasses, go back to that part of the show because the fondness in Ilya's voice when he says, "You wear glasses," like he almost can't even believe that he's getting this glimpse into Shane's fourth house. In the books, it's actually even more dramatic because Shane never lets Ilya come to his house. The first time Ilya ever experiences Shane Hollander in the fourth house is the cottage. Shane Hollander in the books literally buys an entire building in downtown Montreal and make sure that nobody else lives in the building so that he can fuck Ilya because he is so paranoid about crossing that boundary of the fourth house, which I think is hilarious. So when Ilya's like, "You wear glasses," it's his first time ever seeing Shane's bedroom. And before they even get into having sex in the book, he makes him give him a little tour of his house because he's like never even seen his house. It's so cute. I think this is a good spot to transition into talking about some of the queer ambiguity and shame. Ambiguity and shame, they feel so tied together in the eighth house placements of both of these boys and also kind of in the Mercury placements, I think, for queer ambiguity in particular. But let's talk about shame first, because I do feel like the performances of these actors, part of the reason the show is so rewatchable, is that the performance of these actors is so deeply psychological. You can rewatch the same scene 10 times and truly see different things. You can also go back to the book. I cannot wait until they release some extended coffee table book with the scripts. I need to see these Jacob Tierney scripts because the performances are so beautifully psychological. But I was so struck reading the book, the fact that for the better part of a decade, either one or the other of these men approaches every single encounter that they have, telling themselves that they will end it that day. Every single encounter, they carry that shame, the self-loathing. Shane is shaming himself out of this from day one. They have a kiss and he says he brought their lips together and Shane flooded with panic. And then later he says he felt like he was made up of alarm bells, like his panic was somehow going to wake up the entire hotel. Here's another quote. Shane talks about meeting at Ilya's penthouse in Boston instead of meeting at a hotel. And he says it added an extra layer of wrongness onto the mountain of bad ideas they had been scaling for 6 years. Like, it's brutal. I mean, I actually feel incredibly proud when you reach the end of The Long Game. I'm not spoiling anything, but it's a romance series. It has a happy ending. Like, it's incredible that they are able to work through the amount of shame and self-loathing and hatred and internalized homophobia and externalized homophobia that they endure in this series.
I heard this quote, and I wish I would have written down where it came from, where Hudson was talking about how Shane's experience is a yearning that's permeating against your own will. And that's exactly what we're talking about here, like with shame and the aspect of like pride, but also knowing what you're, or at least looking out for what your truth is and eventually finding it.
I think that is spoken to in both of these individuals' charts by this Saturn opposition. So a Saturn opposition just feels like a laser beam that is just like withering away at something. And it also feels like a constant striving for something that is impossible. I think we see this in Shane's attempts to be with women, especially the way that he talks about his relationship with Rose. And it's almost like he had to experience the most perfect possible relationship qualities to rule this out for himself. Like, Rose is a famous movie star. She's drop dead gorgeous. She's really into him. Like, he had to go to its logical conclusion just to show himself that it wasn't real. I think a lot of people born in those summer months, and particularly with Jupiter and Leo during that Saturn and Aquarius period, it's brutal. It's brutal. I mean, I've been open on my channel about the way that this feels for me, especially with Saturn opposite my Venus. So I have a Venus in a malefic enclosure and a Mars in a benefic enclosure, all opposing Saturn. My whole chart comes back to this fucking Saturn. And that's part of the reason this show has been so impactful for me, is like it triggers that Venus Saturn opposition in such a foundational way that I think touches on the dread and the shame and the eighth house shit that we're bringing up here, and also the queer ambiguity for me. Like, some of my most foundational stories and media that I've consumed in my life from the youngest age was male love stories and queer love stories. I think it's something that I'm now thinking more critically about, like, why does this appeal to me? And there's a quality of being locked out of the narrative that, yes, people can say in an empowering way, like, it's spectatorship. It's like the process of watching something that you don't have to perform for. There's no expectations for you. Those are really empowering ways to look at it. And I'd love to believe that that's mostly what it is. But there's also a sense for me that I'm working through in my life that yearning and wanting is my glass ceiling. And for a lot of people with a powerful opposition, especially from a dignified Saturn, that's true. You are always striving. You are always wanting to be better and to be more. It's a very Capricornian goal as well. There's a tendency to assume that you'll never get the thing, that the yearning is the thing you're going for. And I see that a lot in the ways that people are talking about this show. But I think part of what Exalted Jupiter in Cancer is showing people is that it's actually possible to hope for love too. The shame and the dread that permeates the book in particular, and it doesn't overtake it, right? Like, Rachel Reed doesn't create an oppressive environment. It's not a sad book to read. It doesn't feel necessarily heavy to read, but I am always struck by the fact that each one of them says a little monologue to themselves before they walk in the door of their hookup. Shane says to himself he had lost count of how many times he had broken this promise to himself over the years. That's the scope of what they're dealing with. Constant self-betrayal. And this ties back, Zacchaeus, to what you were saying about the second and eighth house, and what I was saying about how if you don't have true self-worth, the second house can leak it out of you. Is like, Shane thinks of himself as a person who routinely betrays himself because he cannot personally overcome this demon around this homophobic environment and his own queerness.
I think it's really, really important. Like that's one of the words that for me, when I talk about this show frequently, is that of how important it is in an age where there are so many things that are being hidden and that are actively being swept under the rug, or the erasures that are being enacted to lots of communities. I think that the thing that I am yearning for, and that I know a lot of the people that are watching this show, people are yearning for an authentic look at queerness. And I think that to do that, we have to look at the shame that's accompanied with that growth, with the growth through discovering who you are, what your preferences are, and then like oh God, I can't want that because of society's X, Y, and Z standards. But what I love about this show is that it shows that, but it doesn't end there, right? And that's that queer joy aspect of what Jacob Tierney is so interested in creating here, is queer joy. It's Harlequin romance, right? Like it's gonna have a happy ending, but that doesn't mean that we don't see conflict. And I think it's done so authentically in the book. We get to hear their thoughts. In the show, we get to see it. We get to see it on their faces.
I think Jacob Tierney so brilliantly captures queer ambiguity in so many places of this show, but especially in episode 1, there's a couple moments. Now, for me, as a queer person, when Shane goes in for a handshake, the second handshake in 60 seconds, in the first scene, Ilya's face, he clocks it. I clocked it. Every fucking queer person on earth clocked it in that moment. It was just like, no, you're not going in for 2 handshakes in 60 seconds unless you have a little crush. But that gym scene, I think, is really where I think people get clued in because of the way that the camera moves. But Jacob Tierney and Jackson Perrell even use that camera work to show the ambiguity because nothing is being shown that is explicit, right? The camera just kind of travels down to Ilya's body in a way that is sort of sexual. And this is such a brilliant recurring theme of the show. I think my favorite scene of the entire show is the all-star game in Florida where they're sitting at the bar and the fucking cruising technique that these two men, I mean, particularly Ilya, the way he's borderline filleting this beer bottle, saying, no, did you bring anyone with you? The queer ambiguity through line of the show is so brilliant. And it goes hand in hand with the shame, because the thing is that being a queer person, especially in the times that you and I grew up in, or the time that Shane and Ilya would have grown up in, is like, you cannot take for granted that it's just okay to hit on someone or to just put it out there that you're gay. There are all of these systems, right? Even throughout queer history, we have bandana systems or little calling yourself friend of Dorothy. There are all of these little flags and winks and mercurial ways that we signal to one another, hey, are you on my wavelength and are you here? I think the show really touches so brilliantly on the ambiguity, and it goes so hand in hand with the shame, because if you misread those cues, the cost we have seen from many other tragic pieces of queer media, the cost is potentially being harmed if you misread those signs.
Yeah, and the way that they cruised each other during that scene is the way that they cruise me in every episode.
Yeah. You told me you hadn't downloaded done the Quinn stuff yet, right?
I have not. Not yet.
I guess I could have known that because you look well rested. So clearly you are not suffering from what I'm suffering from. I had the thought last night. It was a 45-minute long episode. And at the 45-minute mark, I was like, I wonder if 100,000 people jerk off all at the same time, like, is there a big, fun, special, energetic wave that goes around the earth? Probably. These are my thoughts last night.
And this is Venus Kazemi.
I feel like this is a good time to bring up Jacob Tierney's natal chart because his chart is so good. He is obviously an out queer man and has been really outspoken about what he wanted to bring to the show and what kind of things he wanted to show. I think his chart is so beautiful as an ambassador for queer joy. We've got the sun in Libra being hosted by Venus. So the sun, technically in fall in Libra, but hosted by Venus, really dignified. And we have Mercury conjunct that, and we have Pluto conjunct all of that. So this is not like a surface level Libran artistic sensibility. This is like a bone deep sensibility. This is like ruining us with the beauty of the short film that is the episode 6 of The Cottage. And it also just shows, when I think about ambiguity and I think about queerness, I always think Mercury first. I just feel like Mercury has a really powerful role in anyone's chart when we're looking for their ability to navigate a liminal space. I think queerness generally, we can pull back into Mercury and maybe sometimes to like a Venus situation. Jacob's chart just really stands out to me for those reasons.
Close. If you've got the chart pulled up, you can see like that Venus and Mercury are both in the bound of Mercury. You can tell me if this is how you think about them too. Like, I think about if the house is like a house and then the bounds are like rooms in the house. And so like Mercury has its own little room here in Libra, and both Venus and Mercury room. So so it speaks even more to that queerness there.
Yes, that's so beautiful. Especially now I'm jumping a little bit, but looking at Jacob's Jupiter conjunct Regulus in Leo, that Jupiter, Jacob Tierney. I saw him recently on What Chaos, and he goes like, oh, this is what other people mean when they say success. You don't even know yet, babe. It's not over yet. The amount of success and eminence and fame that is in this natal promise of having Jupiter, the greater benefic, conjunct the fixed star Regulus, which is like the heart of the lion. It's like being absolutely fucking famous. It is like the heart is the one single point of Leo, of eminence, of solar prominence. Like, And that is being so activated by Uranus right now in Taurus. I could go off about this. I need Jacob and Hudson and Connor. I'm going to check back in April because there's some crazy shit popping off for these men in April. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I feel like Jacob has really powerful points of synastry with these characters and also with these actors, which I think is a fun way that we have seen them on this press tour having a really playful relationship with one another.
I think about like the journey that like had to go on sort of in his career and like what that must have looked like. I mean, I suppose like Canada's a little different than the United States, I would think, but I would imagine that he sort of knows the journey of rising to fame and like the choice to come out or speak that. So I would be curious to hear him talk about his journey in that way.
The way I feel too about Jacob Tierney's chart is like, I bet we could get pretty profound in a public interview, but goddamn, I would love to share a beer with this man at a bar, at like some seedy little dive bar, and really get into the bone deep shit. One of the things I love most about fine art from my background in fine art and going back to art school as an adult and all this stuff is that I truly believe that the best art that is made in the world leaves itself open to other people's interpretations. So I actually think you're not making good art if your art can only be interpreted one way, or if it's like a one-way street to some plot twist or some revelation about art. I think we went there as a culture, but the best art is so multifaceted and is open to plural and sometimes parallel and sometimes divergent interpretations, which I think is so present throughout the show. But once we get to the cottage, it really feels like this is just a masterful thesis about the plurality of interpretations. So one example I'm going to give you is, I think after Ilya says, "I love you," they have this sunrise moment, but then it cuts to this scene where they're in bed.
What was your mother's name?
It's very clear that what's happening here is that Ilya is dissociating. Like, he's not sitting there with this gauzy, joyful look on his face. Like, he just looks like he's completely dissociating. He's thinking probably about his mom. He's thinking about the impossibility of the situation that they face. He's thinking about the weight of the fact that he has finally accepted that he's in love with Shane, only to run into another brick wall, which is what he was afraid of all along. If I admit that I want you, then I have to acknowledge and reconcile the fact that I can't have you. It's just this brutal little moment for me that's what I bring into it, is not just knowledge of Ilya's story and his inner monologue and where he goes in the long game, but my own chart, which is just like Ilya's and what I would be feeling in that moment. So I feel like Jacob Tierney's chart has this beautiful airy quality, has this mercurial quality, and sort of this poetry to it. And I feel like you can really see that in the ways that he approaches the filmmaking aspect of the show. And even when he sits there and he says the cottage is about queer joy, kind of, but not queer joy in the get in loser, we're going to the cottage way. It's really like something softer than that, something more open than that, something more grounded in reality than that, and also something more complicated than that.
Yeah, I love all of that. And I think it just reminds me of, we've talked about this multiple times, but the fact that this openness of the art that you're talking about, it's like, I don't like, because I work in theater. So like when I go see plays, I don't necessarily want the playwright to have told me what I'm supposed to feel. Like, I don't want to be prescribed the feeling that I'm supposed to have about a thing. And I think that Jacob Tierney has done this so beautifully with this show, is that he's lets me as the viewer have my own experience with it. Like, I get to have my own thoughts about, I mean, clearly we're sitting here talking about this for, for however long we've been here. But like, when you leave it open to interpretation, you actually have this like endless, bottomless well of possibility, like you were saying. And then too, like trusting me that I'm going to be able to put some of those pieces together. And I love that.
Trust and grace are two key words that I would think for Venus in Libra. And it's not just trust in us or himself, it's both. Like, think about how bold the decision was to drop the first two episodes, get everybody absolutely frothing at the mouth for these two incredible actors and their chemistry, and then immediately shift gears without saying a word, right? They didn't name the episode Hunter. When they released the episode titles, they released it as 6 asterisks. So everybody was thinking, oh, this is a homophobic slur, or this is that. No, the episode was named Hunter, and it was such a bold artistic choice. And I think once you view the series as a whole, it becomes obvious. We don't get the joy of 5 if we don't have episode 3. But that's a really bold decision that could only be made with someone with true trust in themselves and their artistic vision. And I want to echo your point because it's been a long time since I feel like culturally we had faith and trust in a showrunner. And that's one of the clearest things that I'm seeing from this fandom about Jacob Tierney is that even when people were going, how is he going to fit in this? Or where does this go? The response largely overwhelmingly online was that the fans trust Jacob Tierney. Everybody would just comment, I trust Jacob. Jacob's going to figure it out. Even fans joking about, this is a little spoiler. In the long game, there is a very dorky song that plays a very important role in the book. And the fans are like, I trust Jacob to rewrite this. I trust Jacob. I can't tell you the last time anyone felt that way about a showrunner, because I think part of what Neptune's been doing in Pisces for the last 14 years has been glamorizing anti-heroes, glamorizing a more antagonistic relationship with figures like the showrunner figure, right? Like we've come to expect a plot twist. We've come to expect something really brutal happening to us and shaking our faith. And I think that's something I'm kind of excited about Saturn and Neptune bringing in Aries, is like a little bit of a return to some structure around morality, for better or for worse. But I can't tell you the last time a showrunner experienced national trust. And to your point, Zacchaeus, what a little ramble I'm on. But to your point, I think there are so many times where he really trusts our intelligence. And that I truly can't tell you the last time I felt in a show, a showrunner that was willing to show us, not tell us. So when we are introduced to Ilya, we don't see montages of riots happening in Russia against queerness, right? Like we don't see people getting beat up and stuff in the streets. We're not hit over the head with it. We know what Russia's like. There's a couple comments made. And then he does all kinds of incredible tie-ins, like using the tattoo song, which kind of references the environment in Russia in episode 4. And then also Ilya saying, I don't know what would happen to me, but I don't want to find out. Like he really isn't hitting us over the head. He's trusting not just our intelligence, but our diligence and perseverance in returning to this material time and again, and like excavating the psychological underpinnings of what's happening and why it's happening. God, there's going to be a Venus-Uranus conjunction at 29 Taurus that is squaring his Jupiter conjunct Regulus. It's also squaring Hudson's Mars at 29 Scorpio. It's also lighting up Connor's Jupiter and Saturn. Like something goes on for these boys in April. So make sure you arrive in April with some energy. And yeah, Zacchaeus and I want to get a beer, or more like Jacob, you go, like, let's go do some, what is that called? Where they like spec out location scouting. Like Jacob can drive the vintage truck, and then Zacchaeus and I will be in the back drinking beer, being weirdos with you. How about that?
That sounds like a great time to me.
This is also a good point to stop and touch on Rachel Reed's natal chart as well, because, you know, when I first pulled this chart, I kind of pulled it off an Instagram post of hers because I'm a sneaky, sleuthy astrologer. But since we have been researching this video and getting ready to record this video, now it's on Wikipedia, so I don't feel quite so guilty about that. And it feels more like public. But we are going to avoid some speculation about things just because Rachel Reed seems like kind of a private person, and I love that for her, and I don't want to get too deep into it. But I was really struck by her Virgo stellium, and I just wanted to kind of call that out and highlight that. We've got the Virgo stellium, we've got the moon in Gemini, and we've got a Mars in Scorpio, which is sexy and hot. But I just love this Virgo stellium for someone who has made such a prolific name for themselves now at this point, writing about queer stories, and specifically closeted queer stories, the kind of stories where the good and the bad is mixed in together, which we see in her chart because she has Jupiter and Saturn together in Virgo. We also have an exalted Mercury.
I'll say briefly, like, I think it's interesting that her Mercury is conjunct to that Jupiter, and I see her as like this beautiful wordsmith and storyteller. I mean, she's blowing up right now, and like Jupiter right now being in Cancer, there's just something here about like she was born, it was like in her natal promise for her words to be far reaching. with this Jupiter Mercury conjunction.
I think there's something interesting about her writing style that's here in the Virgo stellium as well, because it's very practical, her writing style. She's just telling you what you need to know in the books. And that doesn't mean that it's not poetic, because it is, and it's beautiful, and it's psychological, and it's interior. But there is such an economy in the style of writing that she really has, where you're just getting the details that you need to have. I think people are kind of jokingly making reference to this when they talk about how fast these montages move and how much time moves. But Rachel's like, yeah, I'm telling you the scenes that you need to know, babe. We're not doing a bunch of scenes you don't need to know. We're going to blaze through these years, and you want to hear how their relationship develops, and that's what I want to tell you. And to your point about that Venus in Cancer, Jupiter stationed retrograde on that Venus in Cancer. So it's almost like Jupiter was like, hey, I have some gifts for you, but we got to go back first. We got to get you way more fucking famous than you are now. We got to blow this up. And with the other men, Jacob, Hudson, Connor, we see that these oppositions to Uranus, and Uranus is retrograde into Taurus, resulted in virtual overnight superstardom for them. That is very clear. And again, that becomes reactivated in April. So I'm going to take a break from HR. Yeah, right. But I'm going to return with zeal back in April to see what's going on there. But with Rachel Reed's chart, this is part of the eclipse story for her. And I think once we have these eclipses keep playing out in Virgo, and then a Jupiter return for her, same thing with Jacob Tierney, like they did experience some overnight bump, but for both of those individuals, their star will continue to rise. This is part of an ongoing narrative of them enjoying more and more prominence. Like, yes, Rachel Reed went to being a New York Times bestselling author overnight, but it actually gets better from here for her and for Jacob Tierney. Whereas I think, Connor and Hudson both experienced in a 2-month span going from 1,500 Instagram followers to like damn near 1.5 million Instagram followers with those oppositions and squares to Uranus in both of their natal charts. We would be remiss if we left this episode without taking a brief look at the actors' charts. Connor Story, who plays Ilya Rozanov. I am so into this chart, and I think one of the biggest things that everybody says about Connor Story's acting in Heated Rivalry is that Connor Story is not in Heated Rivalry. We can tell the exact moments we're getting Connor Story. I think there's like a smile when Shane takes off his clothes and folds them in episode 1. That's kind of like borderline Connor. We get the surprised smile at the bar scene in episode 5. That's kind of like Connor, but for the most part, we don't even see Connor's Story in this performance. And so, of course, the first thing I'm looking at when I pull up this natal chart is his Pisces sun. Also, the Libra moon, like, good God. Obviously, we don't have Connor's rising. We're not going to even speculate about that here. But, like, that Pisces sun is such a shapeshifter. It's so interesting to hear him talk about that shape-shifting and also use phrases off the cuff. Like he describes himself as an optimistic nihilist, which is maybe the most Pisces sun thing I've ever heard in my life.
When I think of a Pisces, I think of someone who is like a deep feeler, like intuitive, but also like never-endingly curious. That speaks volumes as to why he's so in love with learning languages and why he's so good at it too.
Yes, his chart is such a good example because I get clients in my chair all day who are like, I have a planet in detriment. Am I doomed? Like, let's zoom the fuck in on the fact that Connor Story has Mercury in fall and detriment retrograde. And yet all anyone can talk about is how this man learned Russian phonetically in 2 weeks. So do we really feel like Connor Story has an imperiled Mercury? Do we really feel like his Mercury is suffering? Yeah, no. Especially with Mercury in the Jupiter signs, like Mercury is still ruled by a benefic and it still feels good. But people with Mercury in Pisces and Mercury in Sagittarius are among the brightest people and the most qualified people in any field that they're in. And I think this is a good point to bring up because it's something I'm constantly having to hammer home to people is having a planet in detriment doesn't mean that the planet is evil, bad, wrong, or performing poorly. I mean, Maya Angelou also has Mercury in Pisces. Some of the most beautiful and eloquent people do. But I love this shapeshifter quality to the mutable sun. And I want to talk for a second about that because I also have a mutable sun. And I know you have a fixed sun and Hudson has a fixed sun. So I want you to speak a little more on his sun. Having a mutable sun is actually such a fucking trip because you can be anyone. In any given situation, I can be anyone. I've shared this story before, but for me, a mutable sun is being so susceptible to what's going on around me and to what other people want. My example that I love to share is that when I go out to dinner with friends, I cannot make a qualified, informed, and self serving decision about what I want to eat if I'm sitting at the table because I'm getting everybody else's information coming into my brain. And I always end up with food in front of me that does not suit my food allergies, that doesn't suit my desires. I'm like, why did I order this? I actually take a picture of the menu and I go to the bathroom where I can close the door and look at it in silence because I am so mutable and susceptible to what other people are doing. I think that's a really interesting part of Connor's chart, but he has these really powerful cardinal placements and fixed sign placements that complement it. I'm particularly interested in his Moon Mars opposition across the Libra and Aries axis because it's almost like he has this mutability, he has this ability to shapeshift, but he has tools to direct it into something productive. Not everybody has that. If you don't have anything fixed to remain who you are or cardinal to direct it somewhere, you kind of just float through life, moving from situation to situation and just being an amoeba. But he actually has these really strong directive pieces of his chart as well.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that Mercury being, I use this word, but like easily impressioned. And I say that in a good way. Like it's not firing on all cylinders, but in a really useful way. It's easily impressioned, meaning I'm a little more porous, so I can absorb language, I can absorb ideas, I can absorb inspiration in a way that maybe if my Mercury was really agenda'd, like that I wouldn't be able to, you know? So
Yes.
I find that really cool.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're not talking about this here, but in Rachel Reed's chart, for example, her Mercury is in Virgo, and Mercury in Virgo sounds like a blessing. I do get that, but it is also neurotic. It is also very specific. It cannot be accomplishing anyone else's agenda but its own and at any cost, which is sometimes a great social cost, to be honest. I also really am just obsessed with these two actors' Mars placements. So Connor's story has Mars in Aries. And if you're like, what does a Mars in Aries look like? It looks like slapping your boyfriend in the face, improvised, while you're going down on him, while he's on the phone with his friend. I mean, goddamn, that is the movie poster for a Mars and Aries right there. I love that they found two actors with dignified Mars. I'm sure that was not part of the casting call, but I don't think anyone else could have convincingly played an athlete or like a sexually vigorous athlete in this kind of story. But I think this is an interesting foil between the ways that Connor and Hudson have what's going on in their charts, because I remember Connor's story in an interview with Variety. He was saying fitness for him is getting to the gym every single week, 4 or 5 times a week for years. That's it. That's what fitness is. Like, what a hilarious Mars and Aries thing to say. Mars and Aries doesn't need to justify itself. It just is. It just does. It just feels. It just goes. Whereas if we look at Hudson's chart, Hudson actually has his Mars at the anaretic degree in Scorpio, which is so spooky, sexy, incredible. And I could write an essay about that Mars at the anaretic degree. But specifically when Hudson says that Connor came over to their like corporate apartment before they started shooting and he saw Connor's body, he said that his arms were the size of his legs, and he actually immediately launched a quest to get in better shape. At the total dismay of every editor and director, like it was a continuity nightmare, and he fully acknowledged this. But that Mars in Scorpio is so fixed, dead set on a goal. He was like, I didn't even care if it was going to create a continuity nightmare. I had to get a better body because he did. I just thought that's like such a funny difference between those two Mars expressions.
Oh yeah, like that's also like such an expression of a fixed sun. Like when I put my mind to something, I'm going to do it, and no one's going to get in my way. It tends to make people feel a little intimidating sometimes because they know what they want and they're going to go for it. Maybe sometimes people are a little more direct when it comes down to that. But yeah, that sort of stubbornness of, I'm not going to let you look that much better than me, and I don't care what it's going to do to the continuity. I'm going to do what I want to do. I have healed a lot of myself with my Taurus sun. I'm not perfect, and I'm not speaking fully from experience, but a fixed sun is we're driven. We're driven.
Yeah. No, I feel that. It's interesting because when people ask for my big three, I get to mask as being sane because I'm like, Capricorn rising, Gemini sun, Cancer moon. Yeah, all of the rest of my planets are in fixed signs involved in a brutal opposition. So like, no, I'm exactly the girl I was when I was 12 in every way. I have been the same forever and will be the same forever. And I'm so stubborn. I just got a fucking personal attack from CoStar. It says, you are the dream, the nightmare, and the dream within the nightmare that becomes another dream.
See what the people don't know is that they need to see these like little outtakes of us just.
Oh, I'm leaving this in. I'm leaving this in. Fuck. That was fucking rude, brutal. Oh my God, I checked my phone while I was in the bathroom and the Empty Netters boys got Svetlana on the show.
I saw that, and I also I started watching it, and then I was like, I can't possibly take this in right now. I was like, I have to stay focused.
I gotta go for a walk and like let it move through me.
Absolutely gonna watch it. I also checked my phone, and there is it says L India, but it's like an L exclusive photo shoot with Robbie. Can you see that?
I saw. I think it's interesting that Hudson also has a fixed T-square. So Shane has this T-square from the Jupiter-Saturn opposition, Leo Aquarius, Taurus Sun. Hudson has it from Taurus to Scorpio with his Saturn-Mars opposition, both squaring his Aquarius Sun. And his Mercury retrograde up there. This is such an interesting, fabulous, fixed icon chart. I want to also touch on the moon and Mars because, Shane Hollander has a moon-Mars thing. So does Hudson. And one of the clearest ways I see that. So Hudson has moon-Mars basically co-present, almost conjunct, depending on where the moon is in the day and when he was born. Connor's story has a moon-Mars opposition. And I feel like we can kind of see this in the ways that their physical bodies come across on screen and they talk about their physical bodies. Like Connor's story, there's kind of no position his body's going to occupy on that screen where he doesn't have 8 lines across his stomach. He just has like this really austere looking body in many ways. Whereas Hudson, part of the reason that people are absolute freaks on the internet for Hudson is because we get things like stretch marks, because we get like his soft stomach in certain scenes, because he actually is able to occupy a sort of softness with his body, even though he is absolutely jacked and ripped, of course. But like there is a softness that he can occupy. And I think that's a really beautiful way that Shane Hollander's Moon Mars comes through in the physical acting, as well as, of course, like the welling up of tears and all of the iconic ways that Hudson delivers for us.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to say that I see that not only physically, but I see it energetically as well, is how soft. It's such a cool juxtaposition of like on the ice, hockey players are brutal. Like they are slamming each other against the glass. I'm sure there's a formal term for that. It's rough. But then like you see these two men who have just pummeled their opponents, and they're so well. I mean, they're not always gently touching each other, but but they're.
I mean, sometimes it's a jump scare cut from into the boards, into the couch, and I've got to take a lap around my room. Yeah.
But there is a softness, there's a tenderness, and
Yeah.
I see that presence of the moon there as like a very tender moon. I also, the video that you sent of Hudson boxing, I just have to ask, why does that exist? But also thank the gods it does.
So it's like somebody found a clip of a Gymshark ad that I guess he recorded that's coming out. And I saw it on TikTok, and I feel like when the photographers get his Moon Mars in Scorpio right,
Oh yeah.
with the lighting, with the vibe, with the like outfit choices. There's that picture of him in all leather riding a Zamboni, or the picture of him licking the glass. There's something really special when a photographer gets what's going on
Yes.
with that Moon Mars. And so when I watched him punching, I was literally like, having an
Pulsing.
out-of-body experience. I was like, oh no.
Yeah. It's like anytime I watch Connor dance, I'm like, my body is
Yeah.
unwell.
There's also something interesting here between the ways that people are kind of seeing Hudson and Connor in the media and the ways that they're portraying them. I mean, I think that there are quite a bit of sociological and cultural things that we could look for as two progressives on a phone call. But I think that there is something here when people say, there's two things that I always see as like the number one or number two liked comment on any interview that Hudson pops off in and is like a weirdo in. People are like, I'm obsessed with whatever's wrong with him, which first of all is just a loving thing, right? They're not actually insinuating that anything's wrong with him, but I'm telling you what's wrong with him is this moon in Scorpio, this moon Mars in Scorpio. But in my opinion, that's what's right with him. But I think there's also this interesting narrative of like, I hope he never gets media trained, which is funny. That's such a patronizing and weird thing to say from someone who is clearly doing fan service. How can you sit there and say he's giving me exactly what I want, but with the same breath say, I hope he never gets media trained out of it? Maybe consider, babe, that he is giving you exactly what you want because he knows how to deliver and he's media trained. Maybe you're just not used to someone being sexually explicit or comfortable in their masculinity or presenting their freak on display. But like a man with a fixed T-square. There's also this thing that Hudson keeps saying about himself in interviews where he says he is the most likely person to release a spoiler. I am telling you, as a qualified astrologer with many years of experience and hundreds of client charts under my belt, this man could keep a secret to the grave, through the river Styx, into the next lifetime, and probably he's probably carrying his grandparents' ancestral grudges.
I also think it's really interesting. Like, I love how chaotic he is, and I love how fast his brain moves. He said he's got ADHD or whatever, but I'm sure that's a lot of it is how fast his brain is moving. But I'm also looking at this Mercury in Aquarius that's retrograde, backing up into a conjunction with Uranus, and I'm like, of course this man's brain moves as fast as it does. I know those people too. Like, they've always got something brewing under the surface that they're about to say that's going to shock you, and I love it every time.
I think it comes into the Jupiter and Gemini as well. Jupiter and Gemini, as you damn well know, has many, many ideas. And part of the detriment of Jupiter and Gemini, which is said to be in detriment there, is like there's an incoherent quality to it. But the thing that is so cool about Hudson's chart is that it's ruled by this eclectic Aquarius retrograde Mercury with his sun, with Uranus, as you pointed out. I love the idea that maybe someone even this young doesn't have to wrestle with themselves to grant themselves permission to be incoherent. That's something that people really struggle with, is like, I can't make this all make sense. I can't make this into a linear narrative. I love the idea that a younger actor could say, I don't have to know how this makes sense. I just know who I am. That is the brilliance of the fixed T-square and the fixed sign, is like, this person absolutely knows exactly who they are. One other thing I wanted to mention about Connor's chart is that he has Jupiter and Saturn really close, approaching a conjunction there with each other in Taurus. It's an interesting little lineup. The Saturn-Jupiter conjunction really only happens every few decades. It's called the Great Conjunction for a reason, which, by the way, what was going on late December 2020 for all you fixed babies? Like, that was a huge moment and a huge time. That was this exact conjunction, Saturn, Jupiter, Aquarius, but I digress. That's for a client session. I love this conjunction. It really references like a generational quality to the individual with it. Hudson also has it, but his is out of sign. It's actually kind of closer by degree, but out of sign. So his Jupiter is in Gemini. But Connor has both in Taurus. I just love people with Saturn in Taurus. I love Jupiter in Taurus. I find this to be so beautiful, especially with that moon, and all of it comes back to that Venus conjunct Neptune in Aquarius, which is so eclectic, it's so airy, and it has such an intellectual sensuality to it, governing these really beautiful placements.
I was watching an interview with Evan Ross Katz for Shut Up, Evan, which, just go watch the beginning of that episode. The first like 30 seconds where he's saying, "Shut up, Evan," just go watch. Once you watch,
if you're here,
know.
You're going to like that.
You'll know. Yeah, you're going to be into that. You're going to be into that. But I was watching his interview with that, and they were talking about like, how are you surprised that, you know, this is happening? How does it feel that this is all happening to you? And Connor was like, well, I'm not really surprised because I manifested this. I said when I was a child that I wanted to be an actor. I feel like I called this into my life. And like when I think of manifestation, like I always look to Jupiter and I'm like, what's going on with Jupiter? And I look and Jupiter is in this gorgeous sextile with the sun, like this sun in Pisces, this deeply intuitive, creative, imaginative, in this sextile with Jupiter in Taurus, which is comfort, material wealth. It's everything that he's experiencing right now. Like he manifested this, and this is part of his life. I think manifestation, Connor, you keep manifesting, baby. You keep going.
Manifesting in astrology is actually one of my side interests. I've been researching this for a few years, and there are definitely two types of charts that you see with this. I'm just interested in, I hate the cottage industry that has popped up around manifesting, but I'm interested in why some people are lucky and some people can magnetize and what that means. There is a Sun Jupiter school and there's a Moon Venus school, and Connor's story has both. He has dignity for both. With that Saturn Venus mutual reception, he's got Saturn ruled by Venus and Venus ruled by Saturn. Jupiter rules his sun and is wrapped up in all that dignity. Like, he's got an incredible chart for this. And it's so cool to see the ways that it was activated this fall for both Connor and Hudson, but also for Jacob Tierney and also kind of for Rachel Reed because of Uranus retrograding from Gemini back into Taurus. All of these individuals had huge contacts with Uranus in November, which more than anything, I think speaks to what happened with this show. So we can look to a lot of other places, and a lot of other astrologers have commented on this. And I really do see a case for Jupiter in Cancer, but I think that the main thing we can see is that the really surprising and instigating astrology of November 2025 hit personal placements for all three of these individuals very fucking loudly, obviously. I think that's a good point to take us into why now and what's next for Heated Rivalry and in the astrology. Like, I'm really not a predictive astrologer. I am not into doing that at all. There's lots of talented astrologers who do. I'm more of a vibe smith, but I remember, and I went back to look at my first light transit shows for this time period, and I was talking about zealotry and obsession and obsessive dedication, the kind of obsessive dedication that carries someone to the top of Mount Everest when they're passing by dead bodies, right, the whole way. And they are being told, turn around, you won't make it. And they're going anyway. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that that level of obsession and dedication has made its way into the Heated Rivalry fandom and has inspired people to be obsessed in a way I haven't seen in so long. At that time, we had a series of oppositions to Uranus. So planets were moving into Sagittarius, and Uranus was moving from Gemini, opposite that, back into Taurus. And as I said, each one of these individuals that we've talked about today basically had a major activation during that time of their planets. But honestly, I want to tie all that back into Jupiter and Cancer, because one of the biggest themes I have seen from this show is people talking about how this show has reinvigorated them in terms of believing in love. Like, one of the memes I see all the time is, how dare this show make me believe in love again? I don't know about you, Zacchaeus, but for me, I have felt such a surge of energy in response to the show, but that is directed into my own life. Like, I was talking to a friend about how the show makes me feel and why I'm so interested in it and engaged with it. It took me 5 minutes to explain how I was feeling. And at the end, I realized that what I was describing was being inspired. And that's how long it has been since I felt inspired. Going back to art school as an adult ritually killed my creativity, and it's only just now kind of coming back online. But the show makes me feel inspired. It makes me feel like excited to create things that make me feel good and to create art, and appreciative of Jacob Tierney and Jackson Perrell and obviously Connor and Hudson and just everybody involved with this incredible show. I'm like, oh, I'm just grateful for you guys for making beautiful art that makes me want to pick up my cameras again, that makes me want to create podcasts. It's really inspirational. There is definitely something tied back into that exalted Jupiter, which hasn't felt the way a lot of people thought it would feel, but it has certainly resulted in a renewed sense of optimism and hope in people's lives, I think.
I love that. I also feel incredibly inspired. I mean, I could talk for so long about Connor's work with the Russian accent and the Russian language as a dialect and accent coach. I after I watched that, I sent you I sent you a long voice memo just talking about being inspired and like how much it just meant, because I know the amount of work that went into it. And I'm just so inspired that these two young actors, even at like mid 20s, that they're already allowing themselves to make really good art, and it's not lazy. They're not waiting for something to happen to them. They're doing the work, and it's inspiring to me. And beyond that, I mean, this show, this story, it just makes me feel lucky to be a queer person. Like that I get to be part of this narrative and this story and the way that it's changing the stories that have been told about our community up until now. I've got exalted Jupiter in my first house right now. And so I feel like I've not seen it. I feel like I've had a lot of incredible moments, but I feel like the inspiration that Jupiter is bringing into my life is going to color sort of how I approach moving forward in my art as well.
I think when astrologers were looking at Jupiter in Cancer, they were saying things that I just thought were kind of off. Even at the time, people were saying domestic bliss, goddess, feminine. I don't, that's not, I mean, Jupiter as a deity is associated with Zeus and Thor and Jupiter. Like when I think about that power given every possible resource and taken to its logical extreme, I'm not thinking soft, beautiful energy. I'm thinking kind of what we've got here, which is like a show that challenges your values in a way that improves the long-term success of those values. And I see so much optimism from people about that. Even in an interview Hudson did recently, he was talking about how he feels like his generation is so quick to cut people out of your life. And he loved being a part of this story that kind of encourages people to get involved in the messy work of being in an interpersonal relationship where you have to accept people for their flaws and their baggage. I think that's a huge takeaway that we're carrying in. 2026 has some really tough dynamics to it, but also a lot of really good ones. And I think people are going to be getting a little more desperate for optimism and hope. We've just lived in such a hopeless narrative for so long that I think people are really looking for a lifeline, and the show is giving that to a lot of people. I just have to say I completely relate to your feeling of like, I'm just grateful to be queer. Like watching Ilya Rozanov, bisexual icon. I just like cannot tell you of the last time I felt like proud of the way that a bisexual character was represented in a show, or that bisexuality was even spoken about in a way that felt like it wasn't a joke, or even, I mean, at its worst, many times in my life, hatefully, right? Like I know you can relate to that. So it just is kind of an inspiring moment to be alive and to be watching art and to be a part of this. I think even at the end, when they're driving into the sunset, that scene was all filmed in a way that they felt like Hudson and Shane mixed together and Connor and Ilya mixed together. And Hudson said the thing that he said that really set him off crying was, "Thank you for believing in me." That alone is exalted Jupiter right there. And I think that's such a sweet little visual ending, is like driving off into the sunset, feeling like somebody fucking believed in you.
That's gorgeous.
They have the show greenlit now, but nothing's happened yet. So really the soonest we're ever going to get anything from this is like early 2027. And just thinking about the brutal little Venus retrograde that happens at the end of 2026, followed by a Mars retrograde from Virgo to Leo, right atop those degrees that were lit up by that Uranus opposition for the cast and crew. I'm like, whoa. But also for us as a people, I'm like, we are going to need this show so bad by April 2027. So yeah, we'll crowdfund for you, Jacob. Put it out there. Put the word out. We'll crowdfund. People will loan you their property, whatever we need to do to get this out there by early 2027, when that Mars retrograde just is intense stuff going on. And there's such a weird, I talked about this in my year ahead workshop for 2026, but there's such a strong sovereign feminine dynamic that's really foiled by like a weak, threatened masculine. It's so cool that we have individuals modeling a healthier dynamic for all of us. I think that these are the kind of stories that we're really going to need to carry with us throughout this year, especially for inspiration.
I guess just to say it out loud, and I don't know where this would fit in, but just to say it, like, this show is such a beautiful blurring of the idea of masculinity and what masculinity is. And we see just this, we see the hyper masculine sort of hockey in there, but then we see the tender softness of queer love. And I think that this show, we see all of these hockey bros all over YouTube that are watching this show and they're feeling feelings about it. And so there's something like, yeah, I think there's the challenging aspect that's coming at the end of the year with Venus and Mars and the need to believe in love. But there's something about what I'm seeing right now that's giving me some sort of hope to latch onto, to say, maybe this is the year that toxic masculinity gets really diminished. Like, maybe this is the year where men learn that even if you're not a queer person, hell, even if you are a queer person, emotional availability is sexy and it is craved.
Yes. I think if I'm being honest, it could be the year that it gets shamed into hiding. I don't know if that feels totally optimistic, but that feels more likely. It could be the year that things get radically shamed and sort of like brutally shamed out of being popular, which like I guess would be an improvement of some kind. I think there is so much potential for this surge of optimism. Like even the way that people have been using Heated Rivalry as a way to do creative projects again, to go work out again, as a way to even find love as a possibility again is so beautiful and inspiring. And there really is a lot of doom and gloom about 2026 that's coming out in the astrology community, but I have so much optimism about it. I think there's so much personal agency and excitement. And this is going to be a year where people can really propel themselves forward in dramatic ways. We're already seeing that kick off with like what's happened to this cast and to this show. I hope people carry that in their hearts into 2026. It is a very heart-driven year. Take the lessons from Ilya Rosanov's 10th house Leo stellium, not his 4th house Saturn. Go heart first this year. Be ready. You're setting up a fire ring and there's going to be a bonfire going by the end of the year. So make sure that all the rocks are in place so that your bonfire can be contained in the way that you want it to be contained. But there's so much catching fire this year. And I love that it's starting with a horny hockey boy show. That's it. I think Zacchaeus and I could sit here and talk about this for 10 more hours. And honestly, we're going to hang up the phone and do exactly that and continue to send each other memes on every available platform. Zacchaeus, why don't you tell people where they can find you if they want to enjoy more of your glorious brain?
Yeah, people can follow me. I'm pretty much only on Instagram, really. So you can follow me at __Zacchaeus__, because surprisingly enough, someone else has taken just at Zacchaeus. I don't know where you are, but give it up and give it to me.
You're
Please,
such an asshole, in the words of Shane Hollander.
Yeah, you other Zacchaeus. Come on. Feel free to send me messages, ask me questions, book a natal chart reading, ask about my curl routine, whatever you like. As long as you lead with kindness, I'll probably respond.
Oh, that's so sweet. Oh my gosh. As always, you can find me on @9livesastrology. I am that everywhere. I'm that on Instagram. I am that on my website. I am that on the new 9 Lives Astro Club. It is an online community you can join and geek out about weird stuff like this. It's basically like this conversation incarnate. So if you're learning about astrology or you just want a place that feels safe, if you find yourself frequently getting stressed about astrology, we have all kinds of cool stuff, monthly calls for rituals, blah, blah, blah. Meet me over there. It is 9livesastrology.com/join the club. Thank you so much. This has been a crazy feat. We have been studying and racking our brains. I can't even believe I'm saying this, and you know I'm lying, but I'm tired of dreaming of these men. I would love a dreamless sleep. Fuck, they're gonna haunt me. They're haunting me.
Oh, yeah.
So amazing.
Yeah. Haunt away.
Oh, my God. All right, you're right. I was lying. Stay in my dreams. All right, Zacchaeus, it's been incredible. I adore you, and mwah. Ciao, Bella.
Ciao.